History remembers the headlines, we find the bylines. This is the unsung. The 20th century is remembered for its wars, its political giants, and its technological leaps. But the single greatest act of saving human life wasn't a treaty, a vaccine, or a moon landing. It happened in silent, sun-baked wheat fields. In the 1960s, experts like Paul Ehrlich in his book The Population Bomb prophesied that hundreds of millions would starve to death in Asia. That prophecy failed. Not because of a government program or UN resolution, but because of one stubborn plant breeder from Iowa named Norman Borlaug. He didn't just develop a new crop. He engineered the escape velocity for nations trapped in a cycle of famine. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970, hailed as the man who fed a hungry world. So how does the man who saved more lives than any single person in history become a historical ghost? How was the architect of abundance written out of the story? To understand his erasure, you must first understand his battlefield. Norman Borlaug was a farm kid from Iowa who studied plant pathology during the Dust Bowl. He saw firsthand how crop failure destroyed lives. In 1944, he was hired by the Rockefeller Foundation for a project in Mexico. His mission: improve wheat yields to make Mexico self-sufficient. His office? A remote, underfunded research station. His initial obstacle was a big one: the wheat itself. It grew tall and spindly. When it produced a heavy head of grain, it would lodge or fall over, rotting in the field before it could ever be harvested. Borlaug's insight was both simple and radical. To save the plant, he had to break it down and rebuild it from the ground up. He wasn't just trying to improve a crop. He was waging a war against a fundamental law of nature that was starving a nation. He understood that the solution wouldn't be found in a government office, but in the dirt, under the hot sun, one plant at a time. It was a long, lonely fight, with the fate of millions hanging on the success of his experiments. Borlaug's pivotal contribution was the creation of dwarf, disease-resistant, high-yield wheat varieties and the relentless, hands-on methodology he used to deploy them. The critical juncture came in the early 1960s. Famine was looming over India and Pakistan. Their traditional tall wheat varieties simply couldn't produce enough food for their growing populations. This is where Borlaug's nearly 2 decades of grueling work in Mexico paid off. He had developed a revolutionary technique called shuttle breeding, growing 2 generations of wheat per year in completely different climates to dramatically speed up the process of evolution. His specific action was a stroke of genius. He crossbred a Japanese dwarf wheat variety with the hardy, disease-resistant Mexican varieties he had been perfecting. The result was a game-changer. A short, stout plant that could hold a massive head of grain without falling over. It responded incredibly well to fertilizer and irrigation, and, crucially, it was resistant to the devastating stem rust fungus that had plagued farmers for centuries. The impact was immediate and historic. In 1965, as a catastrophic famine gripped South Asia, Borlaug arranged for a convoy of 35 trucks to carry 550 tons of his new dwarf wheat seed from Mexico to a Los Angeles port. Under armed guard, it was an operation worthy of a spy thriller. Those seeds were then shipped to India and Pakistan. At first, the local farmers were skeptical of these strange, short plants. But the results were undeniable. The harvests were unlike anything they had ever seen. Yields exploded. India's wheat production rocketed from 12 million tons in 1965 to 20 million tons in just 5 years. Pakistan went from importing wheat just to survive to becoming completely self-sufficient. This was the Green Revolution. Borlaug's action wasn't just about providing seeds. It was about providing the biological foundation for national survival and geopolitical stability. He didn't just prevent a famine, he gave entire nations a future. So how was Norman Borlaug forgotten? The mechanism was the invisibility of prevention and the later criticism of his methods. History loves to dramatize crises and battles, not disasters that were successfully averted. Borlaug's greatest victory was the famine that never happened. It's incredibly hard to tell a compelling story about empty graves. When his seeds worked, the crisis faded from the headlines. The world simply moved on, enjoying cheaper bread without ever asking where it came from. The victory of abundance made its own architect invisible. Then came the complexity of his legacy. In later years, environmentalists began to criticize the Green Revolution. They pointed to its reliance on chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and intensive irrigation, all of which carried significant ecological and social costs. Borlaug, the pragmatic humanitarian who made a brutal but necessary choice to save lives now, was often painted as a simplistic poster child for industrial agriculture's problems. The nuanced story of the man who faced an impossible triage decision was lost in a polarized debate. To the governments of India and Mexico, and to the millions of farmers whose children lived because of his work, he was an undisputed hero. But to the wider public, comfortably consuming the fruits of his labor, he was just an anonymous scientist. His story lacked a single, dramatic, made-for-TV moment. It was a lifetime of meticulous, gritty, and largely uncelebrated work in the fields. The modern reckoning with Borlaug's legacy is one of quiet reverence among those who know the full story. The World Food Prize, which he helped establish to honor others who fight hunger, is perhaps his most enduring monument. His true ripple effect is visible in the very population graph of humanity, that sharp bend away from a Malthusian catastrophe. Acknowledging his role changes our understanding of what a hero is. It's not always the person on the front page during the crisis. It's often the person who worked for decades in obscurity to ensure that the crisis never made the front page at all. His life proves that one person, with enough stubbornness and ingenuity, can change the course of human history. Who are the other pioneers you know of? The ones who solved problems so effectively that we forgot the problem ever existed. Share their stories in the comments below. And for more stories of the forgotten heroes who shaped our world, subscribe to the Unsung.